Baylor baseball has found its new man, and he's really not that new. Mitch Thompson coming back to the program. How do former players feel about this hire, and how soon can Thompson win at BU? This is Locked On Baylor.
You are Locked On Baylor, your daily podcast on the Baylor Bears, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Happy Friday, everybody. And the Baylor Bears now have a new skipper in town. And again, not that new, as a guy who's coming back and a guy who recruited our guest today, former Baylor baseball player Max Garner. Max, thanks for joining, and thank you all for making Locked On Baylor your first listen every single day. Max, before we get into the ins and outs and, the coach speak, analytics side, how good of a hire is this, are you happy that Mitch Thompson is the new head man at Baylor?
Over the moon. I mean, I say this, I'm speaking for a lot of people that I played with. We thought he deserved it. We thought he's proven that with his time at Baylor and his time as a head coach since. And I just, he's the sole reason that a lot of us came to Baylor, if not one of maybe two or three real contributing factors for us to show up in Waco when we did, when baseball was really one of the only two or three programs in the school that had kind of a winning tradition behind it. And I think bringing Coach Thompson home is the right move.
Max, when you look at the full scope of Baylor baseball in the last 20 or so years, and you see the Steve Smith years where he had Mitch Thompson with them, as soon as Mitch was gone, Baylor baseball immediately took a hit. Was there a coincidence there?
It's hard. There's a bunch of factors, but I think kind of flatly, no. I think Coach Thompson was in charge of recruiting for, more or less 2 decades. And that kind of consistency as paired with just how good he is at it and how relentless of a recruiter he is, I think that definitely has something to do with it. It's just a huge loss to lose your head assistant, for a 2-decade span all at once.
The big thing that I know you've mentioned, a lot of people have, is the fact that he recruited almost, if not the entire team, on Baylor's best team of all time, right? 2012. And his recruiting pedigree follows suit, as he just had so many good team after good team, great player after great player. For you, your personal relationship and recruiting experience with Mitch Thompson, what makes him such a dynamic recruiter, and how did that play into what got you even at Baylor?
I just think his understanding of Baylor, because I have a Waco family. I didn't grow up in Waco, but I grew up going there for holidays and all that kind of stuff my whole life. And if anything, that kind of made it feel too familiar to me. I wanted to go to college somewhere I thought would be fun and away from everyone I knew and all that kind of stuff. And he just, I remember going to lunch with him one day. It was either in Houston or Austin after a summer baseball game, travel ball stuff. And he just convinced me to come up. It was for a football game, which wasn't the main attraction at that point in time, but just come see the campus. I wanted to be in the business school, so come look through the business school, come talk to people, and just give us a chance, because at that time, the proof was in the pudding. I mean, they were winning, 39 to 45 games just about every year at that point. And it just hosted a regional not, too long before I was a junior or senior in high school. So I knew where they were as a baseball program, but he knew Waco and he knew Baylor enough to pitch it to me the right way to keep me from running off out of state, which is where I probably was going.
Max, I've had conversations with some family members of players and those around the program in the last few days who are all really excited to have Mitch with the program. What's kind of surprising to me, though, is you think about from the position of Mac Rhodes and the administration here, you're bringing on a guy who was in the program before the new administration was in place, right? So it's almost like, somebody gets fired and then you rehire someone from the old regime, which doesn't usually happen. Does that side of things surprise you at all, having Mitch at Baylor? It seems like this would take a lot of gumption from Mac Rhodes to make this call.
Yeah, I'm honest. I was kind of surprised that it was Coach Thompson, especially after it taking, 2 weeks since the Junior College World Series was over with. I was just kind of assuming whoever it ended up being was going to become, going to become a timing thing 2 or 3 days after their season ended, Tuesday after whoever's season it was. So as soon as we got a couple weekends away, or, a week and a half away from the JUCO World Series, I started to have my doubts, but it's turning out to be obvious now that it's just because Max thorough, and even though the guy was right down the street and may have been the guy the whole time, it's obvious that he went through the full process like he has with the other jobs he's had to hire for.
Speaking of that, you look at the Rodriguez hire 7 years ago, and Mitch Thompson's name was in that hat then too. When you look at the resume that he built at Baylor, does it feel like this is a long time coming, that this fit would have worked then, would have worked now, would have worked in 5 years, that this was just Mitch Thompson's job all along?
Yeah, and I think some of it may fall on you guys like me and former players for maybe not being vocal enough during the last hiring session. It was still kind of a shock that Coach Smith wasn't going to be the head coach. I was still playing baseball. We had when you're in the minor leagues, we don't have any money to help out with. We can't do any of that kind of stuff. So we just kind of watched from afar and still thought he probably had the best chance back then. But didn't really give our 2 cents. And I think both former players and, people around Waco and around, some certain parts of the campus were pretty vocal about Coach Thompson from the get-go this time. Not sure if it's what put him over the hill or anything like that, but just we like I've said, couldn't be happier that it's him, both for him and for the program.
Max, before we get into, Coach Thompson's coaching style, personality, ability to win at Baylor and how quickly, was he your number one guy all along from the start in this process? And did you ever feel like somebody else in this search, a name that was thrown out, would have been more qualified or better for this spot?
Not more qualified. Nobody that we were looking at, because there were a couple of head coaches that were younger with less experience that were some of the names. Trout at Texas State and the Louisiana Tech guy that came out, even though I think that was just smoke. And good for both of them. They both got 5-year extensions. But there were plenty other of the high level assistants that I think are plenty qualified. And might have done great. There's some people whose personality is just going to work everywhere. And who knows if you find one of those guys. Sean Allen at Texas, a few other people come to mind, Frank Anderson. But I don't think there's a better fit. I don't think there's anyone involved in the interview process other than Coach Thompson, who loves Waco specifically as much as he does and doesn't ever want to leave. I mean, he's not kidding when he says it's his dream job. He loves Baylor and he loves Waco, and he's qualified, and he's taken a junior college, which is impossible, to a championship level contender every year. And with all the turnover they have to deal with, that is a hard thing to do. And I just don't think there's a better fit.
Whoa, let's pause it right there because I forgot to do a reader. So I want to pop this guy in here and tell you about Bet Online. I've been saying it for weeks. I'm going to keep saying it. Bet Online is where the game starts. So you think that they tip off the ball, the Warriors, the Celtics, NBA championship, stuff like that. You think that's when the game starts? Not when the game starts. Bet Online is where the game starts. Right now you can go bet on not Cape Cod League baseball games, but Major League Baseball games, the NBA Finals. You also have what's going on, MMA, boxing, UCF, that's central, UFC, stuff like that. All at Bet Online right now. Go check it out. Lines for college football games are already out for next season for a lot of those. Also lines for betting on the Heisman winner or the Big 12's champion, Baylor Bears. They're in there. They're in the conversation. You can go put some money on it. All right now at Bet Online where the game starts. Let's get back to Max and Video Drake. Max, the next thing that we can jump into here is a question that only those who have played for Mitch Thompson would really have the full perspective on, and that's the coaching style of the guy, right? You've already seen, what I loved is the day that he was hired, he goes into John Morris's office, they take a selfie together, he's already on campus, he's really excited about this job, and I remember you said the day that Rodriguez left on the Emergency podcast, full circle here, that Mitch Thompson he's a ball coach. He's
Yeah.
not, I'm gonna hold your hand and sing you a lullaby as you go out on the mound. This guy's an old ball coach that knows baseball and kind of has a baseball personality. What
Mhm.
is his coaching style? Does he truly fit that mold of just the old ball coach?
Yeah, I mean, to the good parts of it, and he's obviously adapting with any times, or he wouldn't be having success even at MCC. It's still you're dealing with 18, 19-year-old kids who are it's they're different than the 18 and 19-year-olds were when I was 18, 19. You have to adapt to be successful. But yeah, he's serious at practice. We're all friends with him. He's obviously one of the nicest guys on the planet. That's why he's such a good recruiter. He wants to meet everybody. He's going to greet you with a smile and talk to you for 5 minutes, no matter what. But when you get out there to practice, it's going to be a lot. It's going to be fast paced, and it's going to be fundamentally based, and you're going to need to execute, or he'll call you out on it. But I think people like that they're straight with you. There's no fluff, and he's going to push you like crazy to be as good as you can be.
Does it seem as though, and even in your experience, he's more of a player's coach or an analytical guru? In like Dave Aranda, right? The X's and O's in that guy's brain are unfathomable. Like if he wrote a book, I don't think any of us mere humans could understand what exactly he's putting on paper. Is Mitch
Mhm.
Thompson more that side of things, or the flip side where you find a lot of baseball coach, the guys that know how to operate a dugout?
Yeah, I mean, probably somewhere in between. I mean, you can tell by the way MCC plays that the fundamentals are obviously there. They play good defense. They're really aggressive on offense, bunting, stealing, have some guys that hit for power, whatever. Um, but there's especially a lot of these older Southern baseball guys, there's some feel to it. He's gonna hit the hot bat, even if some analytics for left on left, matchups or something don't make sense. um he's gonna go with his gut on a bullpen change or something like that, even if in a big situation, even if it's maybe not the analytical move, to make out of an Excel sheet. But I think like all the sports have gone now, you have to be aware of what analytics are saying, but there is some sort of balance on trusting your best five or six guys, and trusting your gut on who's performing for you in the last couple weeks.
Max, Mitch Thompson is not going to be able to give Baylor 20 years. That was a conversation in this search. Do you hire a young coach who's 35, 40 years old and can be at Baylor until 2043? Mitch Thompson can't be that guy. Do you have any reservations because of that?
No, because I think he wants to be here as long as he feels like he can help the program, and he's going to be honest with himself about that and with all of us. And he wants to see nothing but good to come for Baylor, whether it's related to baseball or not. And I just don't, even if he's here 5 years, which I think he wants to be here longer, but even if it's five, he's going to leave it in a great spot, either for someone who's already on staff or for someone who we'd have a little bit of you know time and a chance to really figure out who we wanted to take over. So I get that part of it. I there was part of me that wanted some hot shot, that's 40 and be here for 25, 30 years, whatever. But that's just not always the right fit, and he is, and he'll leave it for somebody in a great position.
Max, I want to get your thoughts on Mitch Thompson, how soon he could win at Baylor, especially with the recruiting style he brings from McLennan, where you're basically playing free agency at the end of every offseason. But even before that, when it comes to building the staff and what he has at his fingertips, do you think he goes after Baylor-centric guys? Because that seems to be really, he's just got tunnel vision on just Baylor.
Right. And that kind of remains to be seen. That's something I wasn't really, I haven't really known what he would do if he got the job, on that front, to begin with. So I don't really know as far as a pitching coach. There's a few names that I've heard, but nothing with any sort of force behind it that would make me think it's imminent or anything like that. I think you'll see a familiar face or two. Maybe someone from the Omaha team, maybe some, there's a few coaches around in college baseball or in the high school recruiting baseball coaching, circles that have been here and were players for Coach Smith and Coach Thompson in the past. But I think there's going to be some outside blood for maybe two of the spots. Yeah.
So can we confirm that he has not called Max Garner yet?
No calls to me. I don't think I'm going to be allowed to leave Austin here. So
that's good. Hey, me again, just pausing again here to tell you about Rock Auto. So my car is still not fixed and I am on Cape Cod, so I cannot get it fixed here. So instead I've had to implore Rock Auto. It is like falling apart right now, but they have all the parts your car will ever need. They've been able to help me out with getting my car fixed as much as I can fix it for cheap too. Right now, go to rockauto.com. You'll find way cheaper prices than you will at all the chain stores. You go to a chain store, they're going to make you feel bad for not knowing exact models for your cars. But instead of Rock Auto, you can find what you need, get what you need. It's going to fit. It's going to be the same color. Everything's smooth and much, much cheaper too. Rock Auto, when you go online, you figure out, this is what I want. This is how much it is. I'm saving a lot of money. Wow, you get excited. You tell them we sent you. They know that we sent you. How do you find out about us? Say Locked On Baylor at Rock Auto. All the parts your car will ever need. That's rockauto.com. Max, him coming from MCC and winning the JUCO World Series in 21 and having such unbelievable success there, now coming here, one of the anchors of JUCO ball is recruiting basically a transfer portal style of free agency for those guys every year. You're bringing guys in for 1 year, trying to build them, develop them, and send them off to another Division I program, and then completely rebuilding your roster the next season. How much of an edge does that give Thompson to win right away?
I think it does because the transfer portal has made it a 4-year version of the junior college, feel, at least, especially for baseball. The advantages to going with Coach Thompson is he knows Baylor. He knows how to recruit to a Power 5 private school when you can't give away 100% scholarships. He knows that whole lay of the land. The NIL, everyone's going to be kind of figuring it out for the non-football and basketball sports here over the next few years. So it kind of remains to see what that effect will have on it. But as far as general turnover and being able to maybe talk 15 guys if we need that many, or 12 guys, and to come in, this fall, I think that's the big time advantage of going with any well-connected junior college coach, because it's not just McLennan guys he's going to have access to. It's going to be every coach that he made friends with that they played against, at the College World Series or wherever over the last 10 years. So I think that is the biggest advantage to Coach Thompson.
You see a guy like Schloss, too, go from TCU to Texas A&M and take those guys to a College World Series immediately in year one. The turnaround was, boom. Mm-hmm. Does Mitch Thompson have that capability at Baylor? Maybe not even World Series, but to turn this program around and into a Big 12 competitor, top half of the conference, and maybe a postseason team already in year one? Is that in the cards from what you see?
That's going to depend really on who he brings with him. That's not an incoming freshman. I think even if he were to pull together some sort of pretty good little freshman class here, you just can't put that kind of expectation on them if we're going to roll out a ton of true freshmen next year and let them grow with it or whatever. Mm-hmm. But if he gets a few McLennan guys and some of these other JUCO guys to come with him, and a couple maybe pitchers from Power 5 transfers or something like that, I think there's going to be a noticeable difference for the eye test next year for sure. It's going to look different on offense. It's going to be more fast paced. It's going to just be different looking. But I think, 2 or 3 years, it's going to be a wildly different looking program.
What is I know you mentioned the arms and pulling Power 5 arms. What's the difference in JUCO ball to Division I? Like, had Baylor and McLennan rolled out a regular season game this past year, where is the discrepancy between those two levels of play?
McLennan, the teams that are in the final 8 or whatever at the JUCO World Series, unless, some, like even in D1, someone makes a run and,
right.
Fresno State, I think in 2008 won the national championship. They were a 3 seed in their regional or whatever. But for the most part, like any team that makes it to the junior college World Series could come out on a Tuesday night, especially not seeing a Friday night starter, and win a game. they're especially, I would say, the offensive defensive guys are ready to come up and compete. Now the arms is where there's different kinds of depth, but the top guys are ready to go. There's junior college transfers that turn into all conference guys every year. So I think he'll know who, he's a recruiter. He's been a recruiter on both levels. He knows who the junior college guys who are 1 year guys are, and who the junior college guys who are never going to make it to a D1 level are. So, but I think you can build a roster of a lot of former junior college guys who are 20, 21 years old, and they're mature enough and ready to compete.
Max, kind of one of the last things that I want to hit on here comes from Thompson's ability to keep the players that are already in house. There's got to be some sort of holdover, because you can't replace an entire roster of guys.
Right.
And I know in the last few weeks we've already seen guys like Jared McKenzie enter the transfer portal, and Trey Richardson's gone, and Antonio Valdez, and that list has built Kyle Nevin. How then do you, just Max Garner, if you're sitting down one of those Baylor baseball players that's yet to enter his name in the transfer portal but is thinking about it, how do you sell that guy on Mitch Thompson and staying at Baylor?
Talk to Coach Thompson about Baylor. If you like the school, he'll have you hooked in 5 minutes. And if it's a place you want to be to help a guy who Waco loves, and who anyone who's been at Baylor for 10 or more years loves, then I think you stick around. I think it's not going to take very long in the grand scheme of things. And I would just tell him to talk to him. And I know he's reaching out to him right now. I know that's all going on, and they're all going to get a chance to talk to him on the phone right now. And if they're close to Texas, and maybe even not, they're going to see him face to face here in the next couple weeks. But that's, they don't need to hear any pitch from me. I think a lot of them know who he is and have had some interactions with him. And I know for a fact that a lot of the current players wanted him to be hired. So just talk to him and maybe show up to a fall practice and see how different it feels.
In the same way, Max, there are a lot of Baylor baseball fans who felt like jumped off the ship in the last few years. And I've already seen a few saying, hey, we got to buy season tickets now. That's what you get with Mitch Thompson. From a fan standpoint, what are those going to get from this hire? And maybe could it include a stadium upgrade?
So the stadium is Coach Thompson's biggest hurdle right now, is funding to make Baylor Ballpark as up to par nationally as it was 10, 15 years ago. It was a top 10 park for a long time, probably even top 5 when it was built. The bones are still easily there to make if you're sitting there in the middle of the 6th inning watching a game, it's still a great place to sit there and watch a game. The fan-facing stuff needs to be modernized, from the scoreboard being maybe digital to a second video board in right field. There's a lot of schools with that to display statistics, highlights, all that kind of stuff. They need to get rid of the left field bleachers and build a 2-story building that we've had the plans for since I was on the roster and haven't had the funding for. And it would have a couple of luxury suites for fans to buy for a game. There's all kinds of stuff that needs to happen from a ballpark standpoint to give us a level playing field here in 2 or 3 years, with the way that the rest of the Big 12 and the SEC has funded their baseball programs.
I love it. Well, Max, I'm certainly excited, and I think a big part of the reason I'm excited is how excited you have been about Mitch Thompson and bringing him to Baylor. And like I mentioned before, it feels as though this is a decision Mack Rhoades is making that shows a lot of respect and trust in Mitch Thompson to bring someone who is, quote, old Baylor back into the fold and be the head coach. I know that means a lot to you and other former players, and it feels like you can already tangibly the last few days, feels like Baylor baseball is headed into a 180 and a much better direction as we move forward. So I want to thank you for coming on today and giving all your insight.
Hey, thank you. I agree with you. I think it's a slam dunk, and ready to see what Coach T can build.
Yeah, and for those listening, thank you for making Locked On Baylor your first listen every single day. Our friend Max here from Our Daily Bears also writes a ton of baseball content. Max, where can they find you and your stuff?
Yep. My Twitter handle, MaxGBU21, and ourdailybears.com. I'm finishing up basically a more formal version of everything I just told you to get up there right now. So have that up by the end of the day. And good talking to you again. Love coming on the show, and we'll catch up soon.
I love it. Folks, thanks again for listening today. Have a great weekend. Catch some Hyannis Harbor Hawk baseball if you get a chance, YouTube or Mixlr. And we'll see you back here on Monday. This has been Locked on Baylor.